Hello there, Danny H here. Right, let's see how badly wrong I got League One in terms of my predictions. Now, in 24th spot were Northampton. Northampton, I felt would go down. I had a bad feeling. I had a feeling they'd do pretty badly this year, but they actually finished. I actually had them to finish 21st, so still going down, but obviously they went down in bottom's place. They were about, I think, about mid-table, perhaps lower mid-table for a little while, and then their form just fell off a cliff, and they just ended up going right down the pan this season. Really, really poor run towards the end. In 23rd spot finished Rotherham. Now this was a bit of a surprise actually, because Rotherham had not had a few seasons ago been in the Championship, although that was an absolutely disastrous run in the Championship, probably one of the worst Championship runs I've seen in recent memory, in recent seasons rather. I had North Rotherham up in 14th, so real shocker there. Got that completely wrong. Not sure what Rotherham will do next season. It'll be interesting to see, but they just never really got going this season. Very, very poor for them. I had them up in 14th, but they finished 23rd, second from bottom. In 22nd spot was Port Vale. Now, I was kind of hoping Port Vale would stay up. I just really wanted to see them stay up. I think a lot of people did as well. But unfortunately, they just didn't quite manage it. They had a terrible start and just didn't really recover from it. They had an excellent FA Cup run, though, which was really, really cool to see. But unfortunately, they just didn't really get going this season, which was a real shame. I think, they did have some good form towards the end, but it just didn't. It was just far too late for them to escape relegation, unfortunately. And in 21st spot was Exeter City. They actually had a decent start, and they were actually sort of halfway through the season, sort of in upper mid-table. So, but then it just went disastrously wrong for them. They just completely fell off a cliff, and they ended up getting relegated. They were initially up in. I predicted them to finish 22nd. I had a feeling they'd go down, so obviously it wasn't too bad a prediction. Port Vale, sorry, I forgot to say, were 19th. I predicted for them to finish 19th. But Exeter City, very, very poor season. Very, 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 very poor. I didn't think they'd do very well. I mean, I did have them to go down, but unfortunately they went down 21st. I had them in 22nd. And 20th, Leyton Orient. Now, this was a bit of a shock because they had an excellent season. Were very unlucky not to go up to the Championship last season. I had them up in 11th spot. Unfortunately, they finished 20th. They just about avoided relegation, so a complete contrast to the previous season where they were unlucky to miss out on going up to the Championship. So yeah, real contrast. I didn't think they'd do quite as well this season, but I didn't think they'd do this badly. This was absolutely terrible from their perspective. Hopefully they'll take the summer to sort themselves out and hopefully finish a lot higher next season. In 19th, AFC Wimbledon. I actually had AFC Wimbledon in 24th spot. I really did think they were going to struggle this season. I just felt they were going to have a bad season and it just wasn't going to quite work out for them. They had a decent start, and then their form just fell off a cliff, really. They really did collapse down the league. And they finished 19th. They actually avoided relegation. Depending on what goes on in the summer, the way they fell apart this season, it doesn't really bode well for next season from their perspective, unless they can really, really sort something out and get some really good players in, just sort themselves out. I mean, they haven't got a very big budget, which really doesn't help matters. But they finished 19th and they avoided relegation. I had them in 24th. In 18th spot, Peterborough. Now, this wasn't far off, actually. This was only one place out. I actually had Peterborough in 17th. Now, Peterborough, I knew they were going to struggle quite a bit this season. I mean, recently they'd had some real good seasons, but very recently they just haven't been the same team. They just really have not been the same team, and I think they've overspent on a lot of players. I think, and they just haven't really got themselves up to where they want to be. They were hoping to be aiming for the Championship, but unfortunately that hasn't really worked out that way at all. I had them in 17th. They finished 18th, so not a bad prediction for them. But they really don't look the same team as they were a few seasons ago. 17th spot, Burton Albion. Now, this was a bit wrong, actually. I had Burton in 23rd. I just felt their time was in the second flight, in the third flight even, was going to run out. But unfortunately, they've lived to fight another day. They were up in 17th. Hopefully they can still keep on going, and prove a tough little side who keeps defying the odds. So, yeah, I had them in 23rd. They actually finished 17th, so pretty decent season for them. In 16th spot is Wigan Athletic. I had Wigan up in 13th. Not too far out. Not a bad prediction, but I mean, a bit lower than where I initially had them. I just thought this season they were going to start to move forward after some real financial issues, but they've started to. But I think they've started to sort themselves out a little bit. Hopefully they'll for their sake they'll start getting themselves back up again. In 15th spot I had Barnsley. Barnsley I actually predicted to finish 10th. So a little bit wrong there. I thought Barnsley would do a bit better than that, and unfortunately they just didn't. They just really didn't look good this season. Barnsley, they had a fairly reasonable run, and then their form just tailed off towards the end. Not ideal. I mean, they weren't really in any. They weren't really in any danger of going down, but they didn't really set the league alight, and they didn't really get themselves up the league either. So a bit disappointing from Barnsley's perspective to finish as low as they did. In 14th spot was Doncaster. Now this is another one that was fairly close actually, although it wasn't an exact direct hit for prediction wise. 14th was Doncaster Rovers. I actually had Doncaster in 16th. I thought Doncaster would have a tough season this season. Was it last season they came up or the season before? I can't remember. But they've come up and they just. And this season I thought they were gonna do reasonably well, but I just felt I felt they weren't going to struggle. It was going to be towards the lower end of the league. They just haven't got the budget of the bigger teams in the league. But 14th was a decent place to finish. Was a decent spot to finish in. Actually surpassed my expectations a little bit there. In 13th finished Blackpool. Now I actually had Blackpool quite a bit higher. I thought Blackpool would sort themselves out this season and get themselves moving forward and start heading back towards the Championship, but they didn't. Instead, Blackpool had an absolutely horrendous start, and basically a decent run towards the end actually sorted them out, and they actually finished quite well because they were in danger of going down this season. But they got themselves sorted. They fell up to 30th. I actually had them in 8th, sort of heading towards promotion, but it just never really worked out for them. Be interesting to see what happens over the summer about how they address that. How they address this season. They're going into next season. In 12th spot was Reading. Now Reading actually wasn't far out either. I had Reading up in 9th. I thought Reading would do a tiny little bit better than that. They had a reasonable season by their perspective. They've had a lot of problems, financial problems. A lot of that was the incompetence of their previous owner, just not running the club well at all. And it just didn't work out for them at all. And things just haven't worked out for Reading at all. I mean, I think they deserve to be in the Championship, really, a club of their size, but it just really hasn't worked out for them. They've finished 12th. I had them up in 9th. I thought they'd do a little bit better. I thought they'd start to sort of be edging back towards the Championship again, but it just hasn't worked out for them this season. Hopefully next season we'll start seeing a gradual improvement from their perspective. Now, in 11th spot was Wycombe Wanderers. I actually had Wycombe up in 7th. I thought Wycombe would be a bit closer to promotion than that. I thought they would do a bit better than that, but unfortunately it didn't quite work out. I think Wycombe don't have as big a budget as some of the other teams, although they do have rich owners. They are still a fairly small side, so I think really getting up into the Championship is really where they want to be, where they want to be going, but it just didn't work out for them this season at all. They finished 11th. I had them up in 7th, so a little bit out there. In 10th spot was Mansfield. I thought Mansfield would struggle a bit this season. I actually had them down in 18th. I thought they would have a decent season. But they actually finished quite a bit higher than I anticipated. They have actually spent quite a bit, and they have actually got some decent players in, but not quite sure where they go from here really. I mean, they have had a decent finish. They had a decent finish to last season. They did really well last season, but up in 10th. But really, this summer it is a case of where do they go from here? I mean, can they improve to get up to the Championship? Who knows? Anyway, in 9th spot, Huddersfield. Now, this was another disappointment, really, because I thought Huddersfield would do a whole lot better than this. I had Huddersfield up in 3rd. I thought they'd really make a go of it this season. But again, it just didn't really work out for them. They really were. They really didn't. They didn't really get going properly this season. They had a reasonable season. They did well, but it just didn't. But promotion was never really on the cards for them. It's a real shame because I think Huddersfield deserve a bit better than that. Deserve to be up higher than they are. In 8th spot, Plymouth. Now this was a real shock because I actually had Plymouth up as champion, first place as champions in League One. I really did think Plymouth would be heading straight back up again because they just looked well. They just looked the best organised out of the teams that came down, in my opinion. But it didn't quite work out for them this season. They had a terrible start. Actually looked like they were actually going the other way into the League Two, but they had a really good run towards the end and they were unlucky to miss out on the playoffs. I think that does bode well for next season for them though. So it'll be interesting to see what happens during the summer for as far as Plymouth are concerned. In 7th spot, Luton, another team that I thought would do a whole lot better than they did. And they finished 7th. They just missed out on the playoffs. They had a real inconsistent season, Luton, and it just didn't really work out for them. I actually had them up in 4th, so I really did think they were going to be making a go of promotion this season, but it just didn't really work out for them. It just didn't really work out for Luton at all this season. It's a real shame because I think Luton, they've been up and down the league like a yo-yo. They really have. They went down to National League a few seasons ago. Then they were up in the Premier. Then they got themselves up and up and up back to the Premier League. Then they went down. Now they're in League One. They really do bounce around the league. That team, they really do. But I thought they'd do a bit better this season. I thought they'd be heading for promotion this season, but it didn't really work out that way at all. And in 6th spot, this was a real shocker. Was Stevenage. I actually had Stevenage right down in 20th. I really did think Stevenage would start to struggle this season, but not so. They actually did extremely well, and they really, really, really did. They did a whole lot better than I anticipated. Very, very, really good season for them. So well done to them. Completely exceeded my expectations. They lost the playoff semi-final, which was a pity, but but I think they can hold their head up high for this season. They did have a good season. Not quite sure where they go from there, but obviously they don't have the biggest budget out of the top half of the league. So, but we'll see how that pans out for next season. In 5th spot, Bolton. So Bolton actually went up as playoff winners. I actually had Bolton in 6th, so only one place out actually. I did think Bolton would be making a go of it this season. They have been inconsistent at times though, so they really do need to address that for next season up in the champ. Now they're back up into the Championship. They really do need to address that their inconsistency. They really do, but to have any chance of surviving in the Championship, because it's going to be a lot tougher for them this season. But they did go up, so congratulations to them. Well done. They do deserve it. They have had a real rough time of it. They actually nearly went out of business a few seasons back. So about the same time as Bury went out of business actually. Well, Bury actually reformed and are now right down in the non-league, they're not entrenched in the long league. But Bolton, I think, they have got themselves sorted and they have got themselves back up into the Championship. Be interesting to see what happens this summer in terms of transfers for them. In 4th spot, Bradford. Now this was another one that was completely wrong. I had Bradford. I thought Bradford would do well this season, but they really did exceed my expectations. I had them in 12th. I thought Bradford would have a decent season, but I thought a promotion charge would probably be a little bit early for them, I think. But they've done really well. I expect to see them around thereabouts next season because they are a big side. They've got a fairly big budget, so I think they'll do really well next season. So be interesting to see what happens during the summer. But they finished 4th, and I actually had them in 12th. So really, really good season for them. So they can be proud of that they actually very nearly got up. It looked for several stages of the season like they were going to potentially go up automatically, but their form just deteriorated a little bit, which was a real shame. Because it looked at some points that they were going to go for a second successive promotion, which would have been cool to see. Anyway, 3rd place, Stockport. Stockport I had in 5th. I thought Stockport would be there or thereabouts this season. They have been fairly inconsistent this season, as have a lot of the teams sort of in the playoff spots. They sort of started reasonably well, then they fizzled out. It really was inconsistency that cost them automatic promotion this season. despite finishing third. They were actually quite a way off, actually, and I think it was that inconsistency that cost them dear. I had Stockport in fifth, so not far off at all. Actually, a really, really good season for them. Although in the playoff final they were absolutely horrendous. They really did. I mean, they had a decent first half, but in the second half they just capitulated. They really were bad. We'll see how it goes during the summer months as to how they do next season. So yeah, no, they did really well. I thought they'd be thereabouts, and they were. In second spot, Cardiff. Now this is the only team that I actually got 100% correct in my predictions. Cardiff finishing second. I actually predicted them to finish second. I thought Cardiff would do really, really well this season. I just had a feeling Cardiff were going back up, and that was proven right. A lot of people actually predicted that out of all the relegated teams from the Championship the previous season, that they would struggle quite a bit, but that proved not to be the case at all. They actually went up in second. I actually predicted them to finish second, so pat on the back for me for that. Correct prediction there. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how they get on next season. I mean, hopefully they'll make a real fight of it. We're going to have 3 Welsh teams in the Championship, so along with Wrexham and Swansea. So be interesting to see what happens. And first spot, congratulations to Lincoln City finishing first. Absolutely brilliant, brilliant, brilliant season. They worked hard. They didn't work on the biggest budget, and they've got themselves up in the Championship. So really, really good to see. Now I had Lincoln down in 15th, which was shocking, really, as to where they did finish, but I'm glad. I was glad to be proven wrong in this case, because I think Lincoln deserved it. They just ran away with the league this season. They really did. They really did boss the league, and they bossed every team that came to them. So congratulations to them. They had an absolutely phenomenal season, and I'm really am glad to see them in the Championship, because I think because they deservedly so that they're up there. So yeah, those were a review of my predictions for 2025-26. I got one correct, a few close calls, and a few wrong. So yeah, that's basically where it went wrong for my predictions this season. So hopefully I'll do a bit better next season in League One.